almost fell down as I came in. I was so dead drunk I couldn't...
No, you weren't. Now, people ask about that show.
True.
Marlon Brando permanently altered the landscape of American cinema. His raw, emotionally charged performances in A Streetcar Named Desire, On the Waterfront, and The Godfather forced Hollywood to abandon stiff theatricality and embrace a new kind of truth. Brando didn't simply act, he exposed nerves, instincts, and internal storms in ways audiences had never seen. His influence on modern screen performance is undeniable, and still felt today. But behind the artist who transformed film history lived a man who quietly waged another revolution, one far more personal and far riskier in the era he inhabited. Throughout his life, Brando maintained an intentionally ambiguous relationship with his own sexuality. At a time when even the slightest whisper of same-sex attraction could destroy a career, he made provocative comments while carefully refusing to label himself. "Desire doesn't understand gender," a former assistant recalled him saying. "It just understands attraction." Brando didn't treat sexuality as a political stance or a rebellious posture. It was simply how he experienced the world. He rejected categories, boxes, and restrictive definitions, not out of defiance, but out of instinct. In the decades since Brando's death in 2004, the division between his public persona and private emotional life has softened. Biographies, interviews with those who knew him, and previously hidden personal writings have offered glimpses of relationships that challenge the image long projected onto him. These revelations reveal not inconsistencies, but a fuller, more complex portrait of a man who pushed boundaries not only on camera, but within his most intimate connections. His relationships with men, some confirmed, others only deeply suggested, were not exceptions, but fundamental pieces of a life lived according to his own emotional truth. Celebrity biographer Thomas Henderson summarized it best. Brando's sexuality was as rebellious and boundary-breaking as his acting. At a time when authenticity carried professional risk, Brando quietly refused to conform. Today, 4 key relationships help illuminate the emotional, intellectual, and romantic complexity that shaped him, relationships ranging from passionate affairs to profound emotional bonds that defy easy definition. Richard Pryor, The Unexpected Connection. Of all the revelations regarding Brando's private life, the one that caused the greatest public shock was his affair with comedian Richard Pryor in the 1970 seconds. The idea that these two towering cultural figures, each a rebel in his own art, shared an intimate relationship seemed unthinkable to many. Yet this connection, hidden for decades, was confirmed not through rumor or speculation, but by those closest to Pryor himself. The revelation began in 2018 when music producer Quincy Jones, in a candid interview, casually mentioned that Brando and Pryor had been lovers. Though some of Jones's claims raised eyebrows, the mention of Pryor took on unexpected weight when Pryor's widow, Jennifer Lee Pryor, publicly confirmed it. She stated plainly that the relationship had happened and that Pryor had been open about his bisexuality during the 1970 seconds. Her matter-of-fact tone removed the possibility of gossip. It grounded the story in lived experience. Jennifer Lee Pryor added context that helped frame their connection within the culture of the time. The 1970 seconds, particularly in Hollywood's artistic circles, were an era of experimentation, sexual freedom, and a widespread rejection of rigid labels. She emphasized that the affair wasn't scandalous within their social circles, it was simply part of the exploration and fluidity that defined their generation. Pryor himself, she said, felt no shame about his varied experiences. This relationship matters not only because it connects two major figures, but because it contradicts simplistic assumptions about their identities. Both men publicly dated women, and both crafted personas that didn't easily fit modern conversations about sexuality. Yet privately, each rejected narrow definitions. Brando's fluidity was consistent with his lifelong nonconformity, while Pryor's own writings reveal a man who embraced experience without categorizing it. Their affair occurred during transformative periods for both men. Brando, having reasserted his talent with The Godfather, was shifting into the more eccentric phase of his career. Pryor was evolving into one of the most groundbreaking comedians in American history, confronting racial injustice with unprecedented candor. Their connection, described as short-lived but intense, reflects the climate of the era and the shared rebelliousness that shaped their lives. James Dean, The Rumored Obsession. The most enduring speculation surrounding Brando involves James Dean, another troubled, magnetic figure whose life ended too soon. Though never confirmed, The rumored relationship between Brando and Dean has persisted for decades, largely because it aligns with the psychological dynamic many biographers believe existed between the two. Their paths crossed in the early 1950s, when Brando was already hailed as Hollywood's most electrifying new actor, and Dean was still seeking the role that would launch him to fame. This imbalance created a dynamic that biographers often describe as complex, possibly exploitative, and layered with emotional tension. Dean idolized Brando not as a peer but as an artistic blueprint. He studied Brando's performances, his gestures, his vocal rhythms, even his silences. Colleagues remembered Dean talking incessantly about Brando, analyzing him, imitating him. Biographer Margaret Collins noted that some accounts suggest Brando held emotional power over Dean, alternately drawing him in and pushing him away. This version paints Brando as both mentor and manipulator, using Dean's admiration to maintain control. Others suggest the relationship, if sexual or intimate at all, was one-sided, Dean pursuing, Brando withholding. What nearly all accounts agree on is that Dean's fascination bordered on obsession, while Brando remained enigmatic and self-protective. Brando's longtime friend Carlo Fiore, who witnessed the two together, described interactions filled with intensity and unspoken emotional stakes. Though he never confirmed an affair, the closeness hinted at something beyond simple friendship. One contemporary famously said, "He used Dean like a mirror to reflect his own chaos," capturing the emotional asymmetry many biographers believe defined their connection. Dean's early death ensured his voice is absent from the historical record, while Brando maintained evasiveness whenever questioned. He alternated between acknowledging Dean's talent and denying any deep relationship. The absence of concrete evidence hasn't stopped the rumor from taking hold, in part because it aligns with the emotional patterns seen across Brando's life. Attraction mixed with fear, intimacy tied to power, and relationships that blurred boundaries in ways he never publicly clarified. Wally Cox, the soulmate. Among all the relationships in Brando's life, none was more enduring, intimate, or emotionally profound than his bond with actor Wally Cox. Their connection began in childhood, long before Brando became a cultural icon or Cox found fame as a mild-mannered television star. From the start, their personalities contrasted sharply. Brando was volatile, charismatic, and physically imposing, while Cox was quiet, intellectual, and slight. Yet, their differences created a balance neither man found elsewhere. They remained close throughout their adult lives, despite marriages, careers, and distance. Brando called Cox his soulmate, a term he never used lightly. Their relationship contained elements of emotional dependency, deep intellectual connection, and affection that defied mid-century expectations of male friendship. One biographer suggested that while the relationship may not have been traditionally sexual, it contained levels of intimacy normally reserved for romantic partners. When Cox died suddenly in 1973, Brando was devastated. He acquired Cox's ashes reportedly against the wishes of Cox's widow and kept them in his bedroom for decades, speaking to them often. When Brando himself died in 2004, his final wish was that their ashes be mixed and scattered together in Death Valley. Few actions speak so strongly to emotional significance. This relationship challenges the rigid divisions often applied to intimacy. Brando himself once said, "If Wally had been a woman, I would have married him," revealing both the depth of his love and the limitations of the language available to him. Their bond transcended friendship, romantic partnership, and conventional categorization. It represents a connection built not on physical desire alone, but on profound emotional compatibility, a legacy of emotional truth. Brando's relationships with men do not replace or contradict what the world already knows about him. They complete the picture. They reveal a man who rejected artificial boundaries, not as rebellion but as truth. They show that the authenticity he brought to acting came from a deep internal commitment to emotional honesty, even when it carried personal risk. Long before modern discussions of sexual fluidity, Brando lived according to his own compass, forming relationships based on connection rather than category. His life illustrates that intimacy comes in many forms: romantic, sexual, emotional, intellectual, and that the divisions we impose often fail to capture the full spectrum of human experience. Marlon Brando's genius was rooted not only in his artistic innovation but in his refusal to conform to any role on screen or off that didn't align with his inner truth. His relationships, with men and women alike, reflect the same boundary-defying spirit that made his performances immortal. Understanding these connections doesn't diminish him, it deepens him, revealing a man whose complexity continues to fascinate, challenge, and inspire long after his final curtain closed.